Good afternoon, everyone. I want to call to order today's meeting of the Senate Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections. Secretary, please note that all members are present except for Majority Leader Canizaro. Please mark her present as soon as she arrives. For everyone here in Carson City, I'd ask you to silence your cell phones. We do have on our agenda today hearings on 3 bills, and I would like to get to that hearing, and I believe we are going to start with Senate Bill 53. And I know we've got Deputy Secretary Woloshyn. If that's the order you'd like to start with, otherwise we can. And we can be at ease for just a moment. Good afternoon, Secretary Aguilar, Deputy Secretary Woloshyn. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 53, and please begin whenever you're ready. Thank you for presenting the bill today.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, Chair Orenshaw and members of the committee. Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State, for the record. I'm joined by my Deputy for Elections, Mark Woloshyn, to present Senate Bill 53. This bill proposes to change the dates for filing of candidacy for non-judicial candidates to make it fall earlier in the calendar year. While we originally proposed to shift the filing period to February, I am proposing an amendment to this bill that would change it to align with the candidate filing period already in place for judicial candidates, which occurs during the first 2 weeks in January of the year in which the election will be held. I will now turn the presentation over to Deputy Woloshyn to discuss the details and the reasons for the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Aguilar. Deputy Woloshyn, please begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair Orenshaw and members of the committee. Mark Woloshyn, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, for the record. As mentioned, the bill before you today proposes to change the filing period for non-judicial candidates. The reasoning for this proposed change is specifically to reduce voter frustrations and confusion that the existing timelines create in relation to candidate withdrawals and candidate challenges. Existing law provides that the period for filing a declaration of candidacy for non-judicial candidates begins on the first Monday in March and goes for 2 weeks until it ends at 5 p.m. on the second following Friday. Pursuant to NRS 293.202, candidates have 7 days after the last day of filing, excluding Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays, to submit a written withdrawal of candidacy for office. Only after the period for withdrawals is ended can an elector file a written challenge of the candidate on the grounds that the person fails to meet any qualification required for the office pursuant to the Constitution or laws of the state. Those written challenges must be filed with the appropriate filing office where the candidate filed. In the case of multi-county or statewide offices, for example, the filing office is the Office of the Secretary of State. When the office receives a challenge, we immediately transmit it to the Office of the Attorney General. Though for county offices, it would go first to the clerk or registrar and then to their county district attorney. The Office of the Attorney General or county district attorney has 5 working days to determine if probable cause exists to support the challenge, and then, if valid, would petition the appropriate court to order the person to appear before the court. NRS 293.182 subsection 4 even goes so far as to state that, quote, the court shall give priority to such proceedings over all other matters pending with the court, except for criminal proceedings, end quote. However, we have noticed that even when these statutory timelines are followed strictly, there simply isn't enough time for the county clerks and registrars to work with their ballot printing vendors to remove that ineligible candidate from the ballot before sample ballots and mail ballots have been drafted, printed, or sent. It is critically important to note that NRS 293.250 requires that the, quote, Secretary of State shall prescribe with respect to the matters to be printed on every kind of ballot, the placement and listing of all offices, candidates, and measures upon which voting is statewide, which must be uniform throughout the state, end quote. That means that even if just one county cannot remove the candidate from the ballot for a statewide or multi-county race, then the candidate must remain on all counties' ballots. At that point, the only options to inform the electorate of an ineligible candidate are the posting of signs in polling locations or an expensive postcard notification sent to all active voters. When that happens, voters get confused and state and county election officials are inundated with questions asking why someone was disqualified but is still on the ballot. To be clear, during the 2022 election cycle, thousands of votes were cast but not counted for ineligible candidates who should not have been on the ballot. When initially drafted, we intended to move the non-judicial filing period only as far as necessary. However, given the timing associated with the presidential preference primary, which will occur in the first week of February, the Secretary has recommended an amendment to align the non-judicial filing period with the judicial candidate filing period in January. While the existing non-judicial candidate filing period and subsequent withdrawal and challenge timelines once worked, they do not now and will continue to result in voter frustration until they are amended.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, Cisco Aguilar for the record. Thank you for your time, and we're available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Secretary Aguilar. Deputy Secretary Woloshyn. Members, any questions regarding Senate Bill 53 or the amendment which is posted on Nellis? And there should also be copies here, the committee room in Carson City and down at the Sawyer Building. Senator Daley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Secretary Aguilar. I understand, and thank you for the explanation. Need to find a better way, my view, I don't know. So how long, how many days before the primary, which is in June, do we have to mail out the ballots? Do the ballots have to be printed? How much time before that happens on that? Because I know that narrows it down. So you have the first 2 weeks of March and then the 7 days. So you used up the rest of March. So you have April, May, but then you have 60 days, 30 days, you have to mail it out. So how much time is there really in between there if everything's followed? That the courts would have then to do their duty on a priority basis. Maybe we need to strengthen the rule for the courts. But anyway, answer that question if you can quickly, or first, please.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Chair Orenshaw, through you to.
Oh, please go directly to the member. You don't have to go
Okay,
through the chair.
thank you, Chair. Senator Daley, Mark Woloshyn, for the record. One of the limiting factors is the requirement under federal law to send out a mail ballot to our military and overseas citizens. That has to be done no later than 45 days prior to the election. The counties will typically send out that ballot somewhere between the 45th and really 50th day. Looking forward to the 24 election cycle, specifically to the primary, that's around mid-April. And when thinking back to the 22 election cycle, again, there were two candidates that were disqualified in mid to late April, and by that point, it had already been too late. It is a logistics problem, the ballot process to develop it, get the proofs, and work through those overseas mail ballots. Those are the first priority, of course. And really, again, that inches further back to the beginning of April, so that's part of really the crux of the issue for this conflict.
Any follow-up, Senator Daley?
Yeah, so the court, you're saying realistically or potentially has 15 days there in April before the give or take, and they're not getting it done, can't get it done. I mean, they have it, and they're supposed to give a priority. I mean, 15 days seems like plenty enough time for me, and don't want to say anything disparaging about our judicial system and the judges, but can't we give them a boot and a rear or something? Make them give them a little bit higher priority, or we just say, hey, we'll fine them if they don't make a decision or something. Or the other alternative, to give us a little bit more time, rather than moving back, adding 2 months to the election cycle. There's candidate recruitment. There's a variety of things that have to go into this, people making decisions and various things. One thing that might buy you a week, I don't know that we need 2 weeks of filing. We could cut that down to 1 week, or maybe move it a couple of weeks back and cut it down to 1 week or something. But I think moving it 2 months back is, overkill. But I'd like to be able to give you a little more time, and I had a couple suggestions on how to do that, but moving it back a full 2 months, just, 2 months of campaigning I don't want to have to do, if I'm being selfish. Anyway, some suggestions. I see the Secretary writing some notes. If you have a response, please proceed. Or go ahead. I don't want to take the chair's rule, but.
Anything further, Senator Daley, or?
If they have an answer.
Please go ahead if you'd like to
Cisco
respond.
Aguilar for the
Thank you.
record. Senator Daly, thank you for those comments. I think we need to go back and have a conversation about those suggestions and work with you on furthering defining what those suggestions are and how we implement. Yeah. So,
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you,
thank you.
Senator
Thank you
Daly.
for the feedback. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Any additional questions, members? I guess just one question I have then. If Senate Bill 53 passes with the proposed amendment, for independent candidates who need to circulate a petition, they would then need to start gathering those signatures to have them ready for filing that petition in January now. And so they need to start earlier in terms of trying to get the petition signatures they need?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Mark Valash for the record. The independent candidates, when they first file for candidacy, they hand in and really notify us of their intent to file, so that's when they turn in the blank paperwork. And then for that point, it's really the starting point for them to go out and gather the signatures. So that time period really would just be extended a little bit for the independent candidates. Their deadline is still later on in the election cycle, though.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So they would not have to have all those signatures then by the date of the judicial filing?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Any additional questions, members? Okay, not seeing any additional questions. Secretary Aguilar, did you want to?
No, I'm good.
Is there anyone else here, and thank you for the presentation, anyone else here in Carson City who'd like to speak in favor of Senate Bill 53? Please come forward, and I am going to limit witness testimony to 2 minutes per speaker. We'll start here in Carson City, then we'll go down to the Sawyer Building, then we'll go to the phones, then we'll go to opposition, then we'll go to neutral. So please state your name for the record and proceed. Thank you.
Good morning, or afternoon, excuse me, Chairman Committee, Jamie Rodriguez, Washoe County Registrar of Voters. Here in support of SB 53 with the proposed amendment. The Secretary of State's office went through the timeline. We really have to have everything approved, finalized, and ready to the printers really by end of March to the first week of April is really our timeline. So that's where for us to actually have them all proofed, ready, completed, and ready to be printed to meet those deadlines for the military and overseas ballots to be able to go out at the end of April. So that's where there is time. That's why we're asking to simply do one candidate filing instead of having to split it up. So just wanted to put on the record, we are in full support, and this was a discussion amongst the counties and the Secretary of State's office, and very much appreciate them bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Registrar Rodriguez. Thank you.
Hi, Amy Bergens, Douglas County Clerk Treasurer. I just want to echo what Jamie just said. I was going to come up here and just say, as Clerk Treasurer in the state, I just really appreciate the support that the Secretary of State's office gives us. All of the bills that they bring forward, the proposed bills, they have discussed with us in our biweekly meetings. We give them our input. That's where this amendment came from. We are in full support of this amendment. The additional time, now that mail ballots are just a given in the state of Nevada, the fact that we have to have everything to the printer so soon in order to get the UACAVA out 45 days and the out-of-states 30 days before the election. It's just the additional time is incredibly helpful for us just to get the information that we need to on the ballot to make sure it's accurate, to give us the time to be able to proof and make sure there are not corrections that need to be done on the ballot itself, and gives our vendor that prints the ballots for us enough time to get everything. You figure every single county, every single person is going to get a mail ballot. That's a lot of ballots and a lot of jurisdictions for the vendors to have to support. So we are in full support of this, and we appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clerk Treasurer Bergens. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Orenshaw and committee members. For the record, my name is Emily Prasad Zamora. That's spelled PERSAUD-ZAMORA. I'm the Executive Director of Silver State Voices, which leads the Latin Nevadans Vote Coalition. On behalf of the coalition, I'm here to express our support for SB 53. Moving up the filing deadline for non-judicial candidates ensures that the city and county clerks have adequate time to process candidates' applications. This relatively minor change may seem insignificant, but when looking at it in a combination with the dates of a primary election, it is an important change. With respect to the petitions filled to the Secretary of State's office, the change is equally important, especially given that the Secretary of State's office supervises all state and local elections, including ensuring that the effective absentee system for election is available 45 days before an election. This bill helps streamline the election process and ensures all candidates have a fair and timely opportunity to participate in our democracy. We urge the committee to support SB 53. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Persad-Zamora. Thanks for your testimony.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Annette Magnus, and I'm the Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. We're in strong support of SB 53. We believe these updates to filing dates make sense because they are a much-needed change. In addition, the additional time is necessary in order to have a streamlined process for our hardworking clerks and registrars. Please support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Magnus. Afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Willett. That's Willett, and I am the grassroots manager for All Voting is Local Action Nevada, an organization that exists to expose and dismantle threats to voter freedom in order to make voting safe, fair, and accessible to build a democracy for us all. All Voting is Local Action is also a member of the Let Nevadans Vote Coalition. We support SB 53 because we now have 3 elections and multiple ways of voting. Moving up the filing date for declaration of candidacy makes the most sense, as it allows county election officials more time to prepare. And we have spoken to many county election officials, and as you've heard today, they are in support of this change, and we support anything that will help them do their job. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Willett. Anyone else in support here in Carson City? Down at the Sawyer Building, anyone in support? Broadcasting, if we can go to the phone lines. Anyone who's in support of Senate Bill 53?
Thank you, Chair. To provide support testimony for Senate Bill 53, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support testimony at this time.
Okay, thank you, Broadcasting. We'll now go to opposition to Senate Bill 53. We'll start here in Carson City, then we'll go to the Sawyer Building, then we'll go to the phone lines. Good afternoon. Please state your name for the record and please proceed. And we're limiting testimony to 2 minutes per speaker.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm the state chairman of the Independent American Party. This bill makes it completely impossible for us to have any candidates. The state law requires minor parties to have a state convention before any of those candidates can file for office and turn those names into the Secretary of State. This would make us having to have a state convention, I guess, at Christmas, or maybe New Year's Day, or Thanksgiving. It makes it completely impossible for us to have a doable convention. It's hard enough if it was moved up to February to try to have a state convention, which is our largest event ever, and where we choose our candidates and where we choose our party officers, but this makes it completely impossible. So there is no way that we can have a state convention in the middle of December or whenever we have to do it to choose our candidates. It also increases the time that we have for campaigns, which increases the costs for everybody, and the time that our families are having to cope with having campaigns. So that's a negative, not just for the Independent American Party or any other minor party, but for all parties and all candidates. And so this has worked quite well so far. We've done it for a lot of years with these deadlines. If there's 1 or 2 candidates that aren't able to be processed through the judicial process, maybe that needs to be looked at. But this makes it impossible for minor parties to participate in the process at all, because there's no way to have a convention in the middle of December. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hanson. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Committee. My name is Lynn Chapman, and I'm the State Treasurer of the Independent American Party. And when this came out, I started reading this bill, and I thought, oh, here we go again. How many times do we have to keep going through this? You know, we have to keep coming up to the same problem. Let's move this back. Let's do this and that, and it hurts the minor parties. I'm going to invoke a name from the past. When I was going through some of my notes from previous sessions, I came across an email from Chris June Kiliani. And she really was trying to help us to set something up so that we were able to be happy with the changes that needed to be made. They were made, and that's what we have that's what we have now, is our convention in February. We get our names in by March 1st, week of March, and it works out well. So I'm going to ask the chairman and the committee, if you will help us as a minor party to leave things as it is and not make it difficult for all of us who want to participate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your testimony. Please state your name and please proceed.
My name is Renee Rosentis, and I'm a Washoe County resident. I'm also going to oppose it for the very same reasons that these ladies mentioned, but I'm also concerned about the candidates that are filing to run their races. Is that going to extend the amount of time that they need to advertise and fundraise? And is that going to be a burden on them, especially the grassroots, if they don't have the money to advertise for an extra month? Is that fair for those candidates? So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rosentis. Appreciate your input. Anyone else here in Carson City who wishes to speak in opposition, please state your name and proceed.
Good afternoon, Joy Truszynski, Trushenski. I support what the ladies have said. I oppose SB 53. This makes the campaign season another month longer and is already too long as far as I'm concerned. If anything, I would like to see the time reduced, but keep it the same. And I support these ladies 100%. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Truszynski. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Bepsy Strasburg, Strasburg. I support the previous speakers and oppose Bill number 53, part of a grassroots efforts here to source candidates, and this would cut back the time available for us by 2 months. I'm sure that we can come up with a compromise that will help the clerk recorders and the other processes that they need to go through. But I strongly support that we do some negotiating here and figure out a compromise so that our efforts are not compromised by a acceleration of the deadlines. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Please state your name for the record, sir, and proceed.
Name is Richard Nagel. Richard, R-I-C-H-A-R-D, last name Nagel, N-A-G-E-L. I oppose the bill on the grounds of fairness because, again, we really tried to source candidates for the last election, and getting people to stand up for school board, getting people to stand up for a lot of other slots that were available, that were uncontested, was really difficult. And we were down to the last minute when we got someone to go for Board of Supervisors in Carson City. So again, it really doesn't do us any favors on that aspect to get candidates, and we're trying to get good candidates is really hard. So this is just I just want to bring this up so when we think about this, about making sure that we have open elections, and also that it doesn't hurt the minor parties as well and put undue burden on them. So please think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nagel. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Karen Stevens, Karenstephens, and I oppose this bill. Having helped candidates running for office and knocking on doors, I think this really is a burden for them. So I agree with the past speakers that have opposed it, so I won't reiterate what they've said. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Stevens. All right, anyone else here in Carson City? If not, we'll go down to the Sawyer Building. Please state your name for the record and please proceed.
Hello. Can you hear me? My name is Susan Prophet.
Yes, we
and
can hear you. Please go ahead.
I oppose this one because it does appear that it's going to put a hefty burden on the candidates, and it's going to increase costs. And the only parties that'll help are the two major parties, and I'm not for that. I'm a Republican, but I think we should be fair and transparent and give everybody in our communities an opportunity to run for office and their voices be heard. So I oppose this, and I would ask the Secretary of State to try very hard to be thinking in terms of how to save tax dollar money so that we can put it where it needs to be in our schools and mental health and a few other places like security. So that's all I have to say on this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Prophet. I don't see anyone else down at the Sawyer Building. So broadcasting, if we could go to the phone lines, anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 53, we have a 2-minute cap per witness.
Thank you, Chair Orenshaw. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 53, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 452, please press star 6 on your phone to unmute. Please proceed.
Hi, my name is Lisa Partee, Lisa, P as in Paul, A-R-T as in Tom, E-E. And I just want to say ditto. I agree with all of the opposition reasons behind everything. It all sounds very, smart to me. I don't think we need to do any changes. And it just sounds to me like maybe this is being extended because of these unnecessary mail-in ballots that they've instituted over the last couple of years. Please oppose SB 53. Thank you.
Once again, to supply opposition comment to Senate Bill 53, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no additional callers to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you, broadcasting. I'd like to go to neutral. Now, anyone here in Carson City who wishes to speak in the neutral position on Senate Bill 53? Okay, down at the Sawyer Building, I don't see anyone down there for neutral. Broadcasting, if we go to the phone lines, anyone who wishes to speak neutral to Senate Bill 53?
Thank you, Chair. To provide neutral testimony on Senate Bill 53, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers to supply neutral testimony at this time.
Thank you, broadcasting. Secretary Aguilar, Deputy Secretary Washington, are there any closing comments you'd like to make? Thank you for presenting the bill.
Thank you, Chair. Mark Voloshin for the record. Certainly appreciate all the feedback for and against, and the office is definitely open to continued dialogue about this challenge. Again, really regarding the closing comments, this was again something that we received feedback from our clerks and registrars across the state, and when we looked closely at it, we identified that it would be cost savings for taxpayers as well. And ultimately, again, it comes down to the voters. While we're not trying to inconvenience anyone or add to the amount of work that candidates have to do, reality is there were 1,231 candidates that filed during the 2022 election cycle and 1.8 million voters that received a ballot, a great number of which were confused by the presence of names on there of candidates who were disqualified. And that's ultimately what led to this bill. But thank you for your time, Chair.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. With that, I'll now close the hearing on Senate Bill 53, and I'd like to open the hearing on Senate Bill 54. And please begin. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Orenshaw and members of the committee. Thanks for hearing us again. Francisco Aguilar, Secretary of State for the record. I'm joined by my deputy, Mark Velashan, to present Senate Bill 54. This bill proposes the creation of an election procedures manual and a required county and clerk training program. I'll now turn to the presentation over to Deputy Velashan to discuss the details and the reasons behind the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Aguilar. Deputy Velashan, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Mark Velashan, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, for the record. The bill before you today proposes a significant amount of work for new elections, for the Elections Division of the Office of the Secretary of State. But we're good with that because it hopes to address a significant challenge that has existed for the last 2 years and will likely continue for at least the next decade. The challenge is how to educate and train a new county or city election official in the countless tasks they must conduct in perfect compliance with federal and state laws, as well as our regulations. The education and training must be done as rapidly as possible, yet will leave them with the knowledge and tools needed to conduct an election almost immediately. Case in point, the City of Henderson has a special election coming up on April 3rd of 2023, in less than 35 days. The planning for this special election began almost immediately after the 2022 general election. And while we're fortunate that the City of Henderson has Mr. Louis Valdez as a clerk and he has the support of the incredible Clark County Elections Department, it easily could have been some other brand new clerk or registrar who had to plan an election in the weeks just after their own. This bill therefore proposes the creation of an elections procedure manual. The document would be revised on a biennial basis and reviewed by the Office of the Attorney General prior to approval and to ensure compliance with existing law. While it would be required on a biennial basis, it would be likely that more frequent updates would be issued as the technical and procedural aspects of our elections administration continue to be refined, particularly in its first years of existence. Certainly, an improvement such as our transition to a top-down voter registration system as intended before the June 2024 primary would necessitate enough updates to warrant the publication of a new version. Once created, this elections procedure manual will act as the textbook for a second part of Senate Bill 54, a mandatory county and city clerk training program. The training program would be conducted annually with attendance being required for county and city election officials. While mandatory for the county and city election officials, it would be open and optional for other city and county staff members as well. There would also be a makeup training period so that appointees who fill a vacancy of a county or city election official or new staff members would not have to wait for 2 years to attend training. While we originally intended to define the windows of time that these training sessions would occur, the Secretary has since recommended an amendment to remove the specific dates in order to build flexibility. The exodus of election officials that began following the 2020 election cycle has not stopped, and I know of other county and city election officials who are considering to retire or not run for re-election following this term. The passage of this bill would be a step in the right direction to address the challenges made by these departures so that future election cycles will continue to be administered as required by law.
Thank you for your time and consideration. We're available for questions.
Thank you very much, Secretary and Aguilar and Deputy Secretary Velashan. Members, any questions? Senator Daley.
No surprise there. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when I'm reading through this, as you might suspect, I'm always reluctant to take things out of the regulatory process. You said a couple things there that you said, especially early on, you may have some revisions and various things, but I, for one, think it's going to be better if you go through the regulatory process because then at least I know this Attorney General is going to review it for compliance with the legal authority. But if we have interpretations that are being made that maybe not consistent with various things, and I think even if you had it in regulation and the law changed or anything and you weren't able to update it as quickly as you may not, or as you might otherwise like, I think Section 2, subsection 4 would still cover you because it says nothing in this section authorizes the Secretary of State to include any provision in Election Procedures Manual that amends or conflicts with any provision of state or federal law. So I think you can amend that, change that, or any existing portion of the language, if it in the future becomes contradictory to state or federal law, that part just wouldn't be applicable. And I know, especially in the beginning, as your deputy said, it may require more frequent changes. The regulation process to me is preferable. Being in the legislative branch, then we get to see it more often, right? So that's part of it. But happy to work with you on that. I support having the manual, providing the training. I think that's good. Getting consistency. You have a lot of new clerks. Making sure that they're interpreting the laws all in the same way and everybody's on the same page. And if you identify laws that, are ambiguous, you can come in and change those, try to add in as much actually into statutes so there's less vagueness or less opportunity for people to say, well, that's not covered, so I'm just going to do what I want. I think those things would all be identified over time and would take legislative changes, but for now, I'd prefer it to stay in the regulations.
Cisco Aguilar for the record. Thank you, Senator Daly. I appreciate those comments and thoughts. Yes, regulation obviously provides us the strongest format, but given where we are from a talent perspective within the elections professionals, we have to be ready and prepared to deal with the change in talent. And given the fact that we are now putting elections at the forefront of a lot of our discussions, we need to make sure that we have consistency throughout 17 counties. Deputy Velashan has done a phenomenal job in working with our 17 clerks and representatives of elections throughout the state to ensure that we're all driving from the same playbook. And really, we see this as a playbook to give somebody like me, who's new to this and been in this business for 2 months now, the opportunity to understand what the rules are and to understand what the role is, and to be more equipped to be able to deal with the situations that come up in elections every single day. So thank you. Appreciate the feedback.
Thank you, Secretary Aguilar. I believe I have a follow-up from Senator Daly and then Senator Krasner.
Thank you, and just as a follow-up, and I agree, and I have complete confidence for as long as you're the Secretary of State. Not so much maybe for the next person or that deal, and that's part of my concern. So please come follow up with me when you get a chance, and we can discuss it further. But I got confidence in you.
Understood, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Senator Daly. Senator Krasner.
Thank you, Chair Orenshaw. Thank you for your presentation. My question is in Section 2, Sub 1, where it talks about the Secretary of State preparing and maintaining the election manual. It then goes on to say that each county clerk and city clerk is required to comply with the procedures set forth in the most current version of the election procedures manual. I know in our last election, we had some counties that had voted to count their ballots manually. Would this prohibit them from doing so in the future?
Thank you, Senator Mark Velashan, for the record. I think Senator Daly's point about the election procedure manual not being able to conflict with or create a new statutory requirements speak to your question. At the end of the day, again, it would carry the weight of regulation, but not create new statutes, not create new requirements or limitations that don't exist in the statutes that this body makes. Really, it would be a means to provide clarity to the processes without necessarily, again, adding and trying to attempt to fill in gaps that truly should be filled if they exist through statutes. Does that answer your question?
Quick follow-up, Chairman.
Go ahead,
please.
Senator Krasner.
I'm sorry, it doesn't. Would it prevent the counties who want to hand count the ballots from doing so?
Senator, or Cisco Aguilar for the record, the manual would have to comply with state law, and whatever the state law says, we would have to make sure that that is the rule. If the legislature does not have a ruling on that issue, obviously it would go into regulation of the Secretary of State's office. So if the legislature determined that they did not allow hand counting, we'd always obviously could not supersede that law, and we'd have to follow the legislature guide on that. So the legislature would set the law, the manual would just follow that law, and if we came up with a procedure that is not in state law, we could not conflict with the legislature in any way. So,
Mark Velashan for the record. And as it stands, Senator, the answer is no. There's no law prohibiting the use of hand counts currently.
Thank you very much, Secretary, Deputy Secretary. Senator Krasner, any follow-up? No. Senator Sievers-Gansert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask you about the training. So the training says, I know you said it's not necessarily a certain date, but it does say annually, and we do have some clerks that have been doing this for a long time. So are you going to require every clerk to go annually, or is there a way? So some of the forms that we fill out, you just have to do it once, or training we have to do once. So is this still required for everyone every year?
Senator, thank you for that question. I would say yes, because those clerks who are experienced and have the background that they have is beneficial to the new clerks that are coming into the process. And to be able to have a place where you can have a dialogue about issues or present challenges is phenomenal recently after being elected, the previous Secretary of State Zagaski had a conference with all the clerks in December. And seeing all the clerks having an opportunity to come together and have a conversation, sometimes I think it's a little bit easier to get the clerk there if you make it mandatory, given the politics in their local community. But giving them that opportunity to have a conversation about what the future looks like is phenomenal.
Any
Okay.
follow-ups, Senator Seavers-Cancer?
No, it's putting things in statute sometimes it's a little tricky. I mean, that's sort of a hammer. And it sounds like you've been meeting with clerks. So I'm not necessarily opposed to the training, but just, the idea of putting certain things in statute. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions? I guess one question I have on Section 2, Sub 1, it says the Secretary of State shall biannually prepare, maintain, and publish an election procedures manual. If there was some big technological change or something that happened and you needed to update this manual quicker than biannually, do you think this language would give the Secretary's office that flexibility if you had to, let's say, 6 months after the manual had been published, needed to send out a revised manual? You'd still be able to do that, or do you think the language shall at least biannually prepare? Or?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Mark Velashin for the record. Yes, I do think that, and we're certainly open to discussion and review of the language. I agree wholeheartedly that there will be changes. The transition of the top down that Secretary Aguilar is again, hasn't intended to have in place before June of 2024. I think that's a great example where if we published one on January 1st, by the time that transition to a top down system was completed, we would need to update that manual and not just wait for 2 years. So certainly open to making sure that the language allows for those sorts of updates on a more periodic manner.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary Velashin. Not seeing any further questions, I'd like to go to support.
Mr. Chair, I have
Oh,
one
Secretary
clarification
Aguilar,
for
go ahead.
Senator Krasner. Going back to the question about if it's not in statute, where is its lie? If it doesn't exist, for example, when Nye County determined that they wanted to move forward with Han County, the Secretary of State, because statute was silent, then propagated regulations to be able to deal with Han County, and it would go through the regulation process of creating the administrative code, so then the counties would have to follow that administrative code. Does that make sense? So it goes from statute into administrative code through the Secretary of State's office, which does a process to say, these are the regulations we are putting in place. There is a hearing process, and then it's submitted to the committee within LBC to approve. And then that is the administrative code which the county would then have to follow.
Thank you, Secretary Aguilar.
That makes sense. I hope that makes sense.
Any further questions, Senator Krasner? You're good? Thank you, Secretary. All right, with that, thank you for the presentation. I'd like to open it to support for Senate Bill 54, with the proposed amendment. The amendment is up on Nellis. I should have mentioned that earlier. We also have hard copies here in Carson City and at the Sawyer Building. And I am limiting every speaker to 2 minutes each. So whoever would like to begin, please state your name for the record and proceed.
Amy Bergens, Douglas County Clerk Treasurer. I just want to state, I was appointed in December 2020, right after the 2020 election, which, as we all know, was slightly contentious. And within a very short amount of time, I lost all of my staff that had worked in the elections department. I came in as the clerk treasurer, which means I also had the clerk's department, the treasurer's department, and elections to oversee. The way to get information on elections was limited. I had state law, I understand law, but state law can be interpreted many ways. To have an elections manual like this, something that is accessible for all of the new clerks when they come in, the registrars to be able to follow, to know what the state is requiring, would have been very beneficial when I was appointed. So I just want to say that I am in support of this. Like I stated earlier, the Secretary of State's office has spoken with the clerks and the treasurer, or the clerks and the registrars about this prior to bringing it forward, and we are in support of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Treasurer Bergens.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Doug Goodman, D-O-U-G-G-O-O-D-M-A-N, Founder, Executive Director, Nevadans for Election Reform. For any function to run smoothly and consistently, it requires standard procedures. We all know there is a almost universal, unanimous desire to ensure that elections are run efficiently and effectively. And to do this, it is critical to have uniform processes and uniform training of those responsible for implementing and conducting the process. Top-down, the passage of top-down and the funding of top-down is just an example of why standard procedures are so important. Passage of this bill will also ensure that Nevada maintains its high rankings every 4 years in the MIT surveys of election administrations. In 2016, Nevada was ranked 5th. In 2020, it was ranked 15th. Having set procedures will ensure we keep our high rating in that survey as well. So I urge this committee to pass SB 54. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goodman. Good afternoon. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Chair and members of the committee, for the record, my name is Annette Magnus, and I'm the Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. We are here today in support of SB 54. We believe that it is critical to have transparency and consistency in our systems and in our processes that counties and cities use to implement our elections across the state. Having an updated manual and training for our election staff across the state that is provided by the Nevada Secretary of State is critical to having that transparency and consistency every election. With uniform guidance and standards for administering elections set in writing, voters can continue to trust in a secure and equitable voting process. Please support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Magnus. Good afternoon, Registrar.
Good afternoon, Jamie Rodriguez, Washoe County Registrar of Voters. Here in support of the bill, I will say we have had multiple conversations with the Secretary of State's office on this bill. I was very lucky and in a slightly unique situation when I did take over the Registrar of Voters office in Washoe County, that I did have a working relationship already with the Secretary of State's office. I did have a working relationship with other clerks across the state. And so it was very easy for me to have people that I could reach out to and ask those types of questions because we don't have these types of materials. So it would be really beneficial for new people coming in to have these things readily available. And Senator Sievers-Gansert, I understand the concern about standing people continuing to come to these trainings. However, at the frequency by which election laws are changing right now, I think those refreshers of what those changes are is really beneficial to the state as a whole to ensure that we are all clear on what some of those changes are. I know there was some confusion in our department when I first came down about some of the laws that had been passed and what those final versions were. So I do think it's helpful to have the sitting, existing election managers and operation individuals come and do these trainings regularly. So with that, full support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Registrar. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon. This is Jennifer Willett again, Willett, and I'm the Grassroots Manager for All Voting is Local Action Nevada, and we support SB 54. An election procedures manual is critical to ensuring uniformity in our election system. Last year, our organization had the opportunity to participate and provide public comment during the election procedures manual process. And as you may know, it was the first time in 10 years that a manual was put together by the Secretary of State's office in order to provide details about Nevada's election procedures. We believe that by having a biannual election procedures manual process, we are giving Nevadans an opportunity to understand how elections work in our state, which is critical to a healthy democracy and building trust among Nevadans in how elections work. Additionally, county and city clerks will continually have an updated guide to refer to when making decisions on how to run an election in their jurisdictions. Along with training, SB 54 will support our election officials in running elections safely, securely, and efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Willett. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairman Orenshaw and committee members. For the record, my name is Emily Prasad Zamora, Executive Director of Silver State Voices, and on behalf of the Let Nevada Do It Coalition, we're in strong support of SB 54. We support the requirement of having the Secretary of State's office prepare and maintain an elections procedures manual every 2 years instead of every 10 years. In a joint legislative operations and elections committee meeting last month, the Secretary of State's office presented a concerning statistic. Only 7 of the of Nevada's 17 clerks were in office during the 2020 election. This loss of institutional knowledge is very unfortunate and underscores the importance of having clerks and registrars attend a training every 2 years instead of every 10 years. The manual will not only benefit city and county clerks, but also Nevada voters, since it will be accessible to the general public. This manual will provide an additional opportunity for Nevadans to understand and follow our election process. Additionally, the manual can help prevent misinformation and confusion about Nevada's elections. By implementing this provision, we can help guarantee that all city and county clerks receive adequate training and are equipped with the necessary knowledge and resources to carry out their duties effectively. We urge this committee to support SB 54. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Prasad-Zamora. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairman Orenshaw and members of the committee. My name is Laura Hale, Laurahale. I live in Carson City. I'm a constituent of Senator Krasner's, and I am in support of SB 54. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes, probably a saying that many of us are familiar with. This proverb has been around since 1855, more than 150 years before the advent of social media. The combination of election lies and social media present an exponential threat to our existing systems with disparate and outdated rules that leave openings for malicious action. We have some bad actors who have been pouring money into our elections in Nevada and spreading disinformation about fraud and errant voting machines. Consequently, voters have been confused and angry, while poll workers, registrars, and clerks have been threatened with violence, and many have resigned. The false claims have been debunked repeatedly by honest leaders and election authorities from left, right, and center. Creation of a standard operating procedure will give all election workers and all Nevadans a foundation for managing the process in a transparent, verifiable, and efficient manner. Don't be fooled by grifters who leverage disparate local rules to sow confusion, division, and chaos. Nevadans have had enough. SB 54 is a clear and rational response to move past the division and chaos. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input, Ms. Hale. Appreciate you being here. Anyone else here in Carson City who wishes to speak in support of Senate Bill 54? Down in Carson City in support of Senate Bill 54? Broadcast, can we go to the phone lines? Anyone who wishes to speak in support of Senate Bill 54 with the proposed amendment on Nellis? We are limiting testimony to 2 minutes per speaker.
Thank you, Chair. To provide support testimony on Senate Bill 54, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Caller, you're unmuted.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders. That's CHRISTINE SAUNDERS, and I'm the Policy Director with Progressive Leadership Alliance in Nevada, here in support of Senate Bill 54. We have made great strides in expanding access to voting over the past few years, but much of this information is still new and being learned. Having an election manual that is updated frequently will better educate our election officials and make clear the process and procedures everyone needs to follow. We urge your support.
Once again, we are in support testimony on Senate Bill 54. If you'd like to testify in support, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no additional support callers at this time.
Thank you, Broadcasting. I'll come back to the committee room here in Carson City. Anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 54, please come forward, state your name for the record, and proceed. And we are limiting testimony to 2 minutes per speaker. Whoever would like to proceed, thank you for being here. Please state your name for the record. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Janine Hansen. I'm the state chairman of the Independent American Party. We don't really oppose this bill. We only oppose one section. We think a manual from the Secretary of State is probably a very good idea, and of course, training goes along with that. Our concern is in Section 4, the same as Senator Daley's, and we appreciate his expressed concern that this exempts the election Procedures Manual from the requirements of the Administrative Procedures Act relating to its adoption. I have participated in some of the hearings that were on changes with the Secretary of State's regulations. In fact, there was one during the 2020 COVID time. It was very helpful to be able to go over those elections. I think it made people feel more secure about what was happening with the Secretary of State's regulations. And I think it's a good process to invite the public in to look at these things. And, you know, I know that we have a great Secretary of State, but he isn't perfect, like none of us are. And there might be some small improvement that someone might notice and that could possibly be through the public hearing. And so I really do favor a continued process of any regulations by the Secretary of State going by the procedures manual and having to have a public hearing. I think it's just good for the public as well as for the Secretary of State's office. And that's our only objection. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hanson. Appreciate your testimony. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Chairman and committee, my name is Lynn Chapman, and I'm the Vice President of the Nevada Families for Freedom. And I just wanted to reiterate keeping the process available to the people. More and more people want to get involved. They want to vote. They want to get involved in the processes. And I think having meetings open to the public to where they can become part of the process is important. And I also would like to take the time to thank my Senator Daley for his comments about the regulations. I'm in agreement with him on that, and I think that's important. And thank you very much for the comments, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chapman. Appreciate your testimony. Please state your name for the record, sir, and proceed.
Name Richard Nagel, Carson City. This manual thing and mandatory following a manual surrenders the autonomy of each county to control the elections. And I really don't think it's wise to put all your eggs in one basket and make everybody responsible in lockstep. I think, yes, training should be available and to understand the laws, that's a good thing. But again, to make it mandatory to lockstep with everybody else and lose our autonomy and our ability to control our own elections in our own county it brings a lot of questions to mind. I mean, it really doesn't seem like it's going to be an equal method, and it also we surrender our control to the state, and the state becomes the total power. And I think that is in the wrong direction. I've worked as an election worker in Carson City for 2 elections, and I can tell you with the utmost confidence, the people that were there were very fair, and everything was done by the book that I saw, and they worked their tails off. They really worked hard. Everybody there tried to do a good job, and we really respected that. And I don't understand why we need to steer away from the autonomy that we have and surrender that to the state. That questions the ability of ourselves to govern ourselves. Thank you much.
Thank you, Mr. Nagel. Thanks for your testimony. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Renee Rezentes, R-E-Z-E-N-T-E-S. Thank you. I think that this needs to have a public hearing. We need to be able to find out what's in the manual. I think we do need a manual and something to follow, but we need transparency. I was a poll watcher at 3 polls in the primary, and I also helped in the ROV office as a poll observer. And in the general, I worked in the ROV office. And there were many things that happened that we tried to address that really we don't have answers to. I was mistreated in there. I was good at what I did. I brought in binoculars, and for the general election, people were moved around within 10 minutes of my arrival, so that they were put in my path so I couldn't see anything, even with my binoculars. There was a printer in the cage. They were printing something. We don't know what it was because we can't see. I'm tired of us, the observers, being looked at as the enemy, because we're actually the guardians of the process, of the ballots, of the elections. They should be working with us so that that we can bring the transparency. We have answers. Well, what are they doing on that printer? We can't see. What are they doing over here? We can't see. It's just not right. One night I was there at 10:30 at night, and all the women were escorted out by the security guard. I went to Heather and Jamie, and I asked if the security guard could walk me out. There was no one else being there to observe, and she said no. So how right is that?
And I appreciate your sharing with us what you've experienced, but if you could speak to the bill.
Well, I think that I said that we need to have the hearing. We need to have a public hearing. We need to go through it publicly because I want to know what's in it because of what I went through. I have a vested interest in here. I did speak to the deputy face-to-face at a meeting, after a meeting, and he said that we don't get to pick and choose our statutes that we're going to follow. However, we had 4 polls that I went to that were all handling the surrender ballots differently. And when I spoke to him about it, he said there is no NRS, although I was carrying that with me the whole time.
And I appreciate your testimony. We're at the 2 minutes. Thank you, Ms.
Okay,
Rosentis.
thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon, Joy Truszynski, Truschenski. I say no to SB 54, which would allow the Secretary of State to control all elections in Nevada with no oversight. The rural counties are not like Clark County. I oppose one person of any party controlling the Nevada elections. This is dangerous to our citizens and our freedoms. It puts too much power in one person and takes away the checks and balances in our elections. I already believe our elections are compromised with mail-in ballots and the use of Dominion voting machines, which could be hacked. I was happy to see Nye and Esmeralda counties go to paper ballots in the 2022 midterms. I don't believe that they could do this again if SB 54 passes. I'm sorry, but I do not trust some of our public officials, as they do not hold my values. I do not trust the new Secretary of State, as this bill from him is just a grab for power. Also, there's no detailed script as to what exactly will be in the manuscript. It will be all unified, but all counties are different. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Bepsy Strasburg, BEPSYSTRASBURG. I'm a management experience executive for over 30 years, so I know training is good, manual is good, but used as a reference. It should not be a mandatory, as we have elected our clerk recorder in Carson City. We want our clerk to hear us while keeping to the statutes. If they have a question, or the clerk recorder have a question, they can reach out to the Secretary of State with those questions. The hearing on the manual counting procedures brought a lot of good ideas for implementation. I was at that hearing. A tops-down manual would not promote the really good ideas that came forth during the hearing. one point of view and one way of doing things is not always a good thing. It may bring a false sense of security. I oppose Bill number 54 in its current format. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Strasburg. Please state your name for the record. Proceed.
Good afternoon, Karen Stevens for the record. And I'd like to say I oppose this bill as well. Having retired from the Department of Education, I totally concur that we do need standard procedures, but I'm wondering why wasn't there one before? Why are we just coming up with one now and trying to make it a law? I think we need to stay in the regulation process and allow for public hearings, for input before anything's put in stone. So thank you for your time, and again, I oppose this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Anyone else here in Carson City who wishes to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 54? Not seeing anyone, we'll go down to the Sawyer Building. If you're there for opposition to Senate Bill 254, please state your name and proceed. We are limiting testimony to 2 minutes per speaker.
Yes, sir. My name is Susan Proffitt, and I am the director of the Clark County Legislative Action Committee. I'm also the first vice president of the Nevada Republican Club in Clark County, and I am the first plaintiff of the Election Integrity Task Force. And we sued Joe Gloria for the right to have meaningful observation, and we won. And so I think I have some expertise on this particular bill, and I would, before I have something to say about it, I just want to let our new Secretary of State know that I would be happy to be available to him for any questions and to help him figure out why he might need to tweak this bill a little bit and then resubmit it. We cannot have this go through, not with the way it is. And one of the reasons is because there is no transparency, none at all. In fact, they go out of their way to keep us from being able to see anything at the Register of Voters. And they're very abusive, as some of the other ladies have said, so I commiserate with them. I even had Joe Gloria's forklift operator run after me with a forklift load of tables and shove it within
Ms. Proffitt,
6 inches of my feet. But I say no because...
Speak to the bill.
Because they have a manual, and the manual does not cover everything. It only gives a nice fluffy picture of what's going on, but it doesn't really tell you what's going on. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that the manual that they have is insufficient as it is. In fact, I've already made another one. So if the Secretary of State would like to review what I've already done for Clark County, he's welcome to have a copy of it. We use it for training for our observers. And I would really appreciate it if he would be a little bit more proactive with the community, because we really don't feel that our voices are being heard. And transparency is very important. Optics are very poor. The people that I saw being abused were not the people at the facilities. It was the observers.
Thank you for your testimony. We're at 2 minutes. Thank you very much for your testimony. Please state your name for the record and proceed, sir.
Well, my name is Al Rojas. I live in Assembly District 12, Senate District 21. And I'm all for more transparency. So, you know, I went down at one time when Joey Gilbert requested for them to do the recount. And we were sitting there, but nobody really explained to us what was going on. We just sat down there and watched.
I appreciate your testimony, but if you could speak to the bill, if you could speak to your position on the bill.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, well, that's pretty much all I have to say about that for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Not seeing anyone else down at the Sawyer Building. Broadcasting, if we could go to the phone lines. Anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 54.
Thank you, Chair Orenshaw. To testify in opposition to SB 54, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 452, please press star 6 to unmute your phone. Thank you. Please proceed.
Hi, my name is Lisa Partee, for the record, Lisa, P as in Paul, ART as in Tom, EE. We were all new at a job at some time, and most jobs do have desk manuals for training and consistency, and evidently the Secretary of State's office does have just that. Not sure why we're pushing this now. I feel that usurping public hearings is not being transparent at this time when so many of us have zero confidence in our elections, and I feel that's just wrong to do that right now. If you want to avoid public hearings and regulations, to me it just puts you in a bad light. And I think the counties each have their own rules and regulations of how they want to do things. If some want to hand count, they can hand count. If some don't want machines, they don't need the machines. A lot of us don't trust any of things that's been taking place since the 2020 and before elections. So I would like you to I'm just going to say I don't trust this at all whatsoever. Please vote no on SB 54. And I want to thank the people that did question it, Lisa Krasner or Skip Daly. Thank you so much.
Caller, you're unmuted. Please proceed.
Yes, my name is, for the record, Paul Bodine. Last name is Bodine. I want to thank the chairman and the members of the committee here to allow us to testify. My comment is that the manuals are good. Anybody who's tried to roll out consistent procedures over a number of, particularly if it's a complicated process like our elections, understands that. Consistency is good also, but to a certain extent. I agree with those who are concerned with taking autonomy away from the counties. There's a reason why we have county governments. It's because these localities are not, they don't have the same issues across the board. So I think there's got to be some areas for input from the local, certainly with the local elected officials. I have a statement here that I want to find out if it's true or not. And if it is, if I get some comment from the people who are supporting this or putting it forward. And the statement is, the bill removes the requirement for a public hearing on the election regulations, and in addition, it doesn't provide for input from local election officials. So if that is true, why are those requirements and the ability for local input being removed? Thank you very much for your consideration.
Caller, please press star 6 on your phone to unmute. Thank you. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. This is Pauline Lee calling in. First of all, I'd like to thank the entire committee for its work. Your work is greatly appreciated, and we want to thank you for everything that you do. SB 54 provides a standardization of election procedures, which I greatly appreciate and I do support. However, the one thing I am concerned about and that I'd like the committee to really consider is to have these provisions vetted out. Not only would it increase transparency, but more importantly, education. It's important to educate our population as to what these procedures are so that we all know what it is and so that there's no conflicts in the future. As long as there's not only transparency, but also an opportunity for the population, for our citizens to actually respond directly to certain standardizations. I'm in support of this 54 only to that extent if we can get more buy-in from the population to what those procedures will look like. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cyrus Hojati, Cyrus Hojjaty. I'd like to ditto the comments and viewpoints that everybody else just made previously, although I will admit there are some bright spots to this bill. Hopefully there can be at least a few changes made to it. Yield my time.
Once again, we are in opposition testimony on Senate Bill 54. If you have recently joined the call to testify, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no additional callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcasting. Here in Carson City, anyone who wishes to speak neutral to Senate Bill 54 and the amendment here in Carson City, please state your name for the record and please proceed. We are limiting testimony to 2 minutes per speaker.
Thank you. My name is Tracy Thomas, Thomas. Philippians 1:6 teaches us, I am confident of this, that the one who began a good work in you will continue to complete it until the day of Christ Jesus. I don't know about you, but I find it comforting to know that I don't have to do all this alone. And since you were in the beginning of good works, I hope you find comfort as well, knowing God is sending some help by way of public comment. I pray these comments bring you wisdom and reveals the works of the enemy within our laws that need to be set right. I ask that you, before any blind deleting of statutes, that you please carefully and purposely consider why the laws were created in the first place. What is the purpose of the change? And the change is increasing or decreasing transparency and integrity of our election laws. Sometimes keeping integrity is not easy. But that shouldn't mean we should just remove something because it challenges a bad bill that was passed in the dark of night out of a session without much forethought or any feedback from election officers and the public. If the bad bill continues to be impacted by several
Ms.
good
Thomas,
election laws.
I appreciate your testimony, but if you could speak to Senate Bill
Yes,
54.
I'm getting there.
Thank you.
Such as the few ones I have provided you with the handout that I gave you. This bill and the next bill, the little square on the handout I gave you is the ones that are being erased on the next bill, but the other statutes underneath that, I recommend your consideration of these additional statutes when amending any of our election laws. Mail ballots must be regulated to be received by Election Day in order to allow for election results to be released on Election Day. There is no need to stipulate a postmark date on anywhere in our election laws. The number of ballots received daily and the party affiliation must not be released until Election Day. They are part of the results which unfairly influence and coerce
Ms.
voters.
Thomas, I appreciate your testimony, but I believe you're speaking to a different bill. So if you have any other comments about Senate Bill 54 or the amendment,
Well,
please
I
go
was
forward,
neutral on it because I think the procedures manual is a good idea, but I do think that the workshops and the hearings are necessary because the clerks do not know everything about that goes on in those polling locations out there. Poll workers who work in those things can provide valuable input. So thank you, Mr. Daly, for saying that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Thanks for your testimony and your participation. Anyone else here in Carson City who wishes to speak neutral? Down, I think we may have lost our feed to Sawyer Building. So I don't know if we still have that connection to Sawyer Building. But Broadcasting, if there's anyone on the phone lines who wishes to speak neutral to the measure, please.
We're here, but we don't have anybody who's neutral. We just want that one thing fixed. We want transparency and the community involved.
Thank you, Ms. Prophet. Appreciate it. Broadcasting, if
Thank
we
you.
can go to the phone lines. Anyone who wishes to
Thank
speak
you, Chair.
neutral.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I apologize. To provide testimony in neutral on Senate Bill 54, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you, Broadcasting. Secretary Aguilar, Deputy Secretary of Washington, any closing remarks you'd like to make? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Mark Voloshin for the record. I really appreciate the feedback across the board. And again, the office will continue to be open for discussion. I do want to reiterate, this will be a public document. And in fact, in the rough draft version that we have, I think on page 3, it identifies how to receive public feedback. Of course, we would discuss this with the city and county election officials as well to make sure that the procedures accurately reflect. And of course, the regulatory processes that were mentioned before absolutely will continue in a public manner because there is a lot of merit. The mandated training and mandated manual, again, will contribute to standardization and consistency across the state and county. And having a public document like that will ultimately benefit all of us, the entirety of the electorate and election officials as well. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary Aguilar.
Thank you, committee, for your time today. As we heard in testimony, we're willing and open to discussion to figure out the best interest of the public. So thank you.
I appreciate that.
Transparency is our number one priority.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Deputy Secretary. I'm going to close the hearing on Senate Bill 54. Before I open the hearing on Senate Bill 60, we have 2 bill draft committee BDRs. There should be printed copies at every member's desk. Committee BDR 24-363 relating to elections, requiring the governing body of a county or city to return money appropriated or granted for the purchase of a mechanical voting system or mechanical recording device under certain circumstances, providing other matters properly relating thereto. And then we have BDR 24-364 relating to elections, requiring each county and city clerk to establish and maintain a working relationship with each Indian tribe located in whole or in part within that county or city limits, authorizing an Indian tribe to submit a request to the Secretary of State to allow the tribal identification card of the Indian tribe to be accepted by the online voter pre-registration and registration system established by the Secretary of State and providing other matters properly relating thereto. I'll remind members that a vote in support doesn't mean you're supporting this eventual bill, just supporting introduction so that it can become a bill, get a number, and eventually get a hearing. I'd accept a motion for introduction of these 2 BDRs.
Motion for the introduction.
Motion from Senator Daly. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Majority Leader Cannizzaro. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Secretary, if you please note that BDR 24-363 and BDR 24-364, the motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Now we will open the hearing.
Mr. Chair, if I can interrupt for just a moment. I have just a point of order and wanted to address it to this committee. I appreciate everyone's public dialogue. However, public dialogue that crosses the line into disparaging individuals that have appeared before this committee or disparaging elected officials who are here or disparaging, frankly, any person are just not appropriate for the committee or for any Senate committee. And those sort of ad hominem attacks are not appropriate. And so I would ask that moving forward, public comment be restrained to the bill itself, not to personal attacks on individuals who are appearing before this committee or any individual for that matter. I believe it goes against the committee rules, Senate rules, and just proper decorum. We heard some comments with respect to some of the folks who have testified on the bills today, and that is completely inappropriate. I would also caution that it is also inappropriate to make outlandish and completely false representations on the record before this committee as well. And so if there are obviously opinions about the bills, reasons to oppose it or to support it or to be neutral, I think those are appropriate. But to come before this committee and have to continue to listen to either disparaging remarks, which I think are always inappropriate, or to listen to continual remarks about hacking of voting machines or those types of things that have been repeatedly proven false and have no place before this committee. I would just remind everyone that this is a committee where you cannot just appear and make false representations. And I just wanted to point that out because I think that we have rules in this committee and in this body for a reason.
Thank you very much, Majority Leader. I would like to now proceed with opening the hearing on Senate Bill 60.
Good afternoon, Chair Orange, all members of the committee. Francisco Aguilar, Secretary of State for the record. I'm joined by my Deputy for Elections, Mark Voloshin, to present Senate Bill 60. This bill proposes a number of changes to Title 24, which is the collective name for the 9 chapters of state law that cover the conduct of our elections. To be clear, these proposed changes are not significant shifts in policy. Instead, these are simply changes to various statutes to make them align more cleanly with recently implemented laws. Of note, I have proposed a series of amendments, one which proposes to remove one of the original provisions. Sections 6 and 10 of this bill provide that the mail ballot central counting board must complete the count on or before the 9th day following the election, instead of or on or before the 7th day. The intent of this proposed change was to allow the counting of mail ballots that are returned to county election officials over the 7th, but before the canvass by the county commissioners. In the last 2 election cycles, there were perhaps 15 to 20 ballots that fell into this category during each election. Unfortunately, this effort to ensure all legally cast ballots could be counted will simply not work given the other statutory deadlines. So I hope I have proposed an amendment to remove these sections from the bill. I'll now turn over the presentation over to Deputy Velashan to discuss the details of the remainder of SB 60 and the additional proposed amendments.
Thank you, Secretary Aguilar. Deputy Velashan, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Mark Velashan, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections for the record. The cleanup bill before you today proposes a number of changes. Existing law provides the text of the declaration of candidacy for partisan offices, but it does not apply to an independent candidate as it has a specific line stating the candidate's party affiliation. Section 1 of this bill creates a declaration of candidacy for an independent candidate for partisan office that omits any reference to a political party. Existing law also allows the payment of a candidate filing fee to be done by cash, cashier's check, or certified check only. Section 2 allows that it may also be paid for by credit card if that option exists at the filing office. Of note, it would not require any filing officer to accept a credit card payment, but rather those that are able to could accept that form. Sections 4, 8, and 12 to 17 of this bill provide that for the purposes of determining the majority of the votes cast in a primary election for an office for which voters may select more than one candidate, each ballot upon which a voter marked a valid choice for one or more candidates for that office shall be deemed to be one vote cast in the primary election for that office. This situation came up during the 2022 election cycle. Lander County had a school district race where 7 candidates were on the ballot for 3 seats. Existing law allows that if one candidate receives 50% plus 1 vote during the primary election, then that candidate is declared elected and will not appear on the general election ballot. But with voters being able to pick up to 3 candidates on that race, it was not clear as how to determine if anyone had received 50% plus 1 of the votes. This proposed change would address that confusion in Lander County as well as in other jurisdictions that have similar provisions and who could potentially see similar confusion. Existing law provides that every ballot with the names of candidates for any statewide office or for President or Vice President of the United States must contain an additional line in which the voter may select none of these candidates. The statute specifically calls out that the line have a square next to it, whereas we have only used ovals or circles on our ballots for quite a few years. In fact, I could not find an example of the last time we did use squares instead of ovals on our ballots. Section 5 of this bill proposes to change the word square to the word space for uniformity. Section 7 requires the Secretary of State to adopt by regulation a cyber incident response plan specifically for elections. It also requires a county or city clerk or other election official to notify the Secretary of State of any cyber incident or attempted cyber incident in accordance with the cyber incident response plan. NRS 293.875 already requires immediate notification of any cyber attack or attempted cyber attack. But the development of this cyber incident response plan would provide additional clarity for election officials as to what needs to be reported and when. Section 9 of the bill requires a withdrawal of candidacy by a candidate for a city office to be presented within 7 days as opposed to the current timeline of within 2 days. This change will make the withdrawal period for candidates for city office consistent with the requirement for all other candidates. Section 11 revises the definition of uniformed service voter to include a member of the active or reserve components of our newest branch of the U.S. military, the Space Force of the United States. Section 19 proposes to repeal certain outdated provisions. Specifically, NRS 293.365 and NRS 293C.365 require that no counting board in any precinct, district, or polling place in which paper ballots are used may commence to count the votes until all ballots used or unused are accounted for. One could see how the legislative intent of the statute from 1960 was to ensure that if, for example, 200 ballots were issued, then they'd first get accountability of all 200 ballots before starting the tabulation. Given how our elections are conducted nowadays with mechanical voting devices and mail ballots, the statute is no longer applicable. NRS 293.423 states, quote, "At the hearing of any contest, The ballots may be opened and a recount made in the presence of the parties or their representatives of the votes cast for the various candidates for the contested office. There are statutes in place that describe the process for a recount and an election contest and that allow for the complexity of how elections are administered nowadays. It simply would not be possible to open ballots and conduct a recount during a court hearing of an election case, particularly since NRS 293-400, subsection 3, requires that during a recount, quote, all ballots must be recounted in the same manner in which the ballots were originally tabulated, end quote, which means the use of mechanical tabulators. NRS 293.567 requires the county clerk to transmit the number of registered voters in the county and their political affiliation to the Secretary of State before certain elections. The intent of this statute was to have a final number of registered voters in each county before Election Day. However, with same-day voter registration, the actual voter turnout and number of registered voters continues to change up to the close of polls on Election Day. This information is very important to both county and state election administrators, and we will continue to get it in order to determine the percentage of voter turnout. But this statute requires information to be compiled and sent no later than 4 days before Election Day. So it is not an accurate depiction of our registered voters and is inaccurate almost upon submission as other voters continue to register up to the close of polls. Finally, there are 7 additionally proposed amendments to this bill that were identified during and after the 2022 election cycle. The first is a minor adjustment to improve our list maintenance process that would allow a clerk or registrar to update a voter's registration using information received through the National Change of Address, or NCOA program. That is currently allowed, but NRS 293.5307 requires a notice to be sent to and confirmed by a voter before that change can be implemented. This change would give the clerks and registrars the option to implement the change and then send a notice to the voter afterwards. Next is the inclusion of special elections into the statute in NRS 294A that covers the campaign contribution limit. NRS 294A.100 addresses primary and general elections and special elections specifically for a recall, but not a special election to fill a vacancy. This change proposes to address that omission. 2 proposed changes relate to risk-limiting audits. The many pilot risk-limiting audits we have conducted following statewide primary and general elections and local special elections have informed these 2 proposed changes. The first is a proposed change in the timeline to ensure that there is time to do a risk-limiting audit properly. Of note, the proposed change will still enable the results of the risk-limiting audits to inform an election challenge under statutory timelines. The second proposed amendment is an allowance in NRS 293.391 so that it would clarify that in conducting risk-limiting audits, clerks and registrars are authorized to use the voted ballots and other records that would otherwise be secured in the vault of the clerk. The 5th proposed amendment is a clarification of the filing fees in order to make them more understandable. The only new fee on the list proposes to clarify that all presidential candidates must pay the filing fee of $250. NRS 298.109 currently only requires independent candidates for the office of President of the United States to pay the $250 fee. This proposed change will standardize that for all candidates, same as our other fees for statewide and federal offices. The 6th would enhance our security against threats to elections infrastructure, proposing to make NRS 293.755 more inclusive. Right now, it is only a crime to interfere with, or attempt to tamper with or interfere with a program or machine used to count ballots. This change would expand that so that it covers all programs and systems used in the conduct of an election, such as voter roll databases, election management systems, and checking kiosks, which are all critical to the process. The final proposal relates to the recent passage of the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act of 2022, referred to as the ECRA, which was part of an omnibus appropriations bill passed in the last days of the 117th Congress. There are numerous changes in the ECRA, but an analysis conducted by the Elections Division, in conjunction with our Deputy Attorneys General, identified 2 significant changes that make up this recommendation. The first is to clarify who will submit the certificate of ascertainment. Existing law suggests, but does not specify, that the Secretary of State will do so. While this has been our historic precedent, it should be clear in statute. The second and more complex proposal relates to the new timelines required under the ECRA for the selection of presidential electors. Our current timelines for canvass, recount, and contest do not line up with what is now required by the ECRA for the selection of presidential electors. In 2024, for example, we must certify our presidential electors under the new requirements of the ECRA by December 11th of 2024, but we could still be conducting a recount or challenge, which under existing law could extend through the end of December. That difference in the timelines must be reconciled or we risk a significant issue after each presidential election.
You can see how incredibly nuanced and detailed-oriented these proposed changes are. That reflects our desire as an election administrators to ensure that the law is kept accurate and clean to benefit all of our candidates. Those of us who administer elections and the public who are increasingly reading and reviewing our statutes in order to understand our process. Thank you for your time and consideration. We remain available for questions.
Thank you very much, Secretary Aguilar. Thank you, Deputy Secretary Woloshyn. Members, any questions regarding SB 60 and the amendment? Senator Daley, then Senator Krasner. Senator Krasner first.
Thank you, Chair Orenshaw, and thank you for your presentation. I've had some questions from citizens, and so if I may ask for a clarification. The question comes in regards to Section 19, where some provisions of the NRS are repealed. That's on page 21. And then if you look down at the bottom, it tells you which sections of the NRS are repealed. 293.423, recount of ballots at hearing of contest, is repealed. The concern I've heard is that there's not going to be the ability to recount ballots if somebody wants to contest an election. If you could please speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Mark Valash for the record. The recount and contest processes will absolutely continue. This simply clarifies that the ability during a contest to conduct a recount in front of a body, that's simply not possible given the way elections are administered now. But the recount and challenge processes are very important to the electoral process and absolutely will continue.
Thank you very much. Any follow-up? Senator Daley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I actually have 3 or 4 questions, if I can.
Please go ahead.
So the first one is in Section 2 regarding the credit cards. I'm not necessarily opposed to the credit cards, but it's quite a process. There's an extra fee that's charged, so it should make clear that the candidate's going to be responsible for that fee rather than the local government, et cetera. And then, of course, someone could also then pay, theoretically go through. We've already heard what a tight time limit is to get on the ballot and then challenge that charge. And then, so I guess if you let people pay through the credit card, might have something along the lines that said, until we actually receive the money, we're not putting you on the ballot. Pay cash if you want to be sure, right? I'm just saying there's a safeguard, so my comment there, and I'm sure you guys can figure something out. But you shouldn't put people on notice that they have to pay that fee. Second one is in Section 4 and Section 8 and 12 through 17 regarding the vote count, and you have it in the charters and various things where there's multiple candidates on that. The thing that I looked at when I read it, the way it's written, it says that it counts as one vote if a person voted for one or more valid votes. So I think that captures that it's a vote if he voted for 1 when he could have voted for 3. It's a vote if he voted for 2 if he could have voted for 3. It's a vote if he voted for 3 out of 3. That's going to count as a vote. But I don't think it captures the scenario where the person could then say, I voted for 1 or more, but I overvoted, which then would be a no vote if I voted for 4 and I was only allowed 3. So I think that needs to be clarified, that you can't overvote and still have it be counted. Is in all of those sections, it reads the same. And to me, it's not clear on an overvote. Is it a vote or is it not a vote? And a person could come back and argue the technicality is I voted for 1 or more. You said it would count. So I think that's just a clarification, easy enough to remedy. The next questions goes to the amendment. And so I had a question, and this one's a little more complicated, on the one where you're going to amend NRS 293.394 subsection 2, where you remove that you're going to do this prior to certification. So maybe you can explain to me, the way I read it is that there's an audit that's required. It's a risk audit that you would do. Of course, you would do it prior to certification. Why we would want to remove the prior to certification part when the reason for the audit is to reduce the risk that you would certify an incorrect count. So I don't understand why we would want to do that. It seems contradictory to me. If you have a risk audit to reduce the risk that you're certifying and you do it after you're certified, doesn't make sense.
Thank you for the question, Senator Mark Velashan, for the record. So we started doing the risk limiting audit pilots back in 2020. We've done them every election since, statewide, local as well, to get the practice. One of the biggest themes that we saw was that these are extremely time intensive, and that while at the end of the day, what led to this amendment, while they are very valuable in validating the results of the election, to do them and try to squeeze it into the timelines that we have, given the other requirements, 4 days to accept ballots, 2 more days for signature curing, a day for provisional comparisons. The clerks and registrars are then working on the paperwork for the Board of County Commissioners. They simply won't have enough time to do it. And such that, again, recognizing that the entirety of the process includes the challenge period, if there is an issue that comes up during a risk limiting audit at any point, either it was during the period after Election Day up to the canvass, or even in the days following it, that process would still enable that challenge. So it doesn't negate completely the purpose behind it. In fact, it's still very valid. It just simply shifts when it becomes more applicable.
So I appreciate, and I know we have all these time crunches and various things. So what you're saying is the certification is different than the canvas is the last step, or is the certification and the canvas the same thing? And you're after the certification, but before the canvas, so there's still a challenge within that. And you think you can do this in that time period? And then the follow-up questions secondary to that is, how many of these risk audits did show them and that a wrong count was certified?
Thank you for the question, Mark Velashan.
If any.
Mark Velashan, for the record. That was it, Senator. There have no issues have come out of our risk limiting audits outside of procedural issues where we maybe messed up something as part of the pilots, right, which is very much the intent, the learning process. So the audits have come back very cleanly. The county commissioner's canvass is that final step in the process. There are a number of other post-election audits and reviews that we do as well. This would very much be one of those, in the same sense that we closely scrutinize attempts to vote twice and other things going past the election, in many cases for months after. This one would be done, again, very closely to the canvass in the week or so after.
So just to be clear, the intent would be to try to meet the timeline in any event. You would try to. But if you didn't, in any event, you'd have this risk audit before canvass was done. Is that going to happen, before the final step?
The goal would be to, absolutely. It may not be before the county canvass. For a general election, it would be before the Supreme Court canvass, though. But that would be the intent. Okay.
Very good. The other thing I got is in your amendment on 293.755, subsection 1, after the word election. It appears to me that you guys left out the word with. It should say with the intent. There's a word missing. Just wanted to prove I read it all. I'm kidding. And then I think my final question, if I can, Mr. Chair, was on the Electoral Count Reform Act. I think you explained a little bit what I was looking for there, but I would ask you to come follow up with me just so I'm clear. But I think the explanation you gave answered the question that I had. So.
Thank you very much, Senator Daly. Senator Severs-Ganser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm looking at Section 6 and 10 when you're moving the date required to count all the ballots from 7 days to 9 days. And I think many voters were frustrated over the last election cycle because we were sort of last to report the results because of the lag. And so my question is whether you've considered changing the postmark date to the last day of early voting instead of the last day of the election so that we can get the ballots in early, the mail-in ballots earlier, and then we don't have to keep moving things out. And I know the clerks, before we had the last election, had put on the record that they were going to have a hard time meeting these deadlines because you just don't know exactly when mail is going to be delivered. And so I don't know that this helps the problem. in that people are just so frustrated, and that's part of the reason I think people start questioning the results of the election is because it's dragged out so long because of the lag in the count.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. It's a great question, and I understand the frustration, the concern. I know there is some discussion in this body about that determination, so I think that discussion needs to take place. And obviously, the Secretary of State's office will follow any law that comes out of it and implement that law fairly. I think the conversation in that situation is strongly heard from the clerks about capacity, the ability to count ballots by the time election night ends. I think if you look at some of the data that we have now, and we're going through that data, is to say, was this an issue of the date when the postmark was marked on the ballot, or was it the ability of the counties to count ballots by election night? I think if we look at, and I may be wrong, but I believe the number is 6% of ballots were received after the day of election. We had 94% of the ballots in hand on election night. It was just the inability to process all of those ballots. And so we need to really look at what the county's processes and systems are and what their capacity is to count ballots by election night. I think the number in Washoe County of ballots received after Election Day was 3%. So we had 97% of the ballots in hand on Election Day. It was the ability to count those ballots. And so again, we need to work with our clerks to understand how we increase capacity so we're able to call elections election nights.
Thank you.
Any follow-up? Members, any additional questions for Secretary Aguilar, Deputy Secretary Woloshyn? All right, not seeing any additional questions. Thank you for the presentation. We'll now open it to support of Senate Bill 60 and the proposed amendment here in Carson City. Again, I'm limiting testimony to 2 minutes per speaker. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Committee. Jamie Rodriguez, Washoe County Registrar of Voters, Washoe County. Do want to thank the Secretary of State's office for bringing this forward. Appreciate their intention, but deletion of that extra days in sections 9 and 10. And I do understand your point, Senator Daly, about the risk limiting audit, but I just want to go through very quickly kind of what happens in terms of our timeline and our processes that exist currently. So after the election, you have up until the 6th day to cure your ballot, which means on the 7th day after the election, we are finalizing pulling those cured ballots, ensuring that we can count those, whether they have to be duplicated, which of those can be counted to finish that, getting our reports to the Secretary of State's office of what ballots have been counted so that we can determine what provisional votes can be then counted once we get those cleared. So that's day 8. Which means I have day 9 to have my certification board come in, certify my VVPAT rolls, certify the machines again to ensure that nothing happened with the counting machines for the ballots. That's on day 9 for me to bring it to my county commission on the 10th day for a canvass. So that's why we have been doing the risk limiting audit after the election. It's really why we still need that time to do it afterwards. The certification board for Washoe County, because of the volume that we have, does take an entire day. It is a good 9-hour day for the certification board to go through to confirm the VVPAT rolls, that all of those are accounted for and correctly counted against what's actually on the roll versus what was counted in the system. So that process in and of itself for us is an entire day. The risk limiting audit is also an entire day. So there really just isn't time in that 10-day time period for it to get to the canvas to be able to do the certification and the risk limiting audit. So that's why that has been requested from us to move it backwards. So thank you.
Thank you, Registrar.
Good evening. For the record, Emily Prasad Zamora, PERSAUD-ZAMORA, Executive Director of Silver State Voices, and we are in strong support of SB 60. We commend the Secretary of State and his team for making cybersecurity a priority and taking the appropriate steps to safeguard the voting process. There's lots of different reasons why we support this. We'll make it short and sweet. Thank you so much, and we urge the committee to support SB 60.
Thank you, Ms. Prasad Zamora.
For the record, my name is Annette Magnus, and I'm the Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. We are here today in support of SB 60. We believe that all of the provisions that are listed in this bill make sense and are necessary for improvements to our processes. We are especially supportive of the cyber aspects of this bill to ensure that our elections continue to be the best in the country and that we have the safety and security necessary to keep up with our current political climate. Please support this cleanup measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Magnus. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Amy Bergens, Douglas County Clerk Treasurer. I just wanted to come up and share my support for this bill. Majority of this is stuff that through the biweekly meetings that the Secretary of State's office has with the clerk's office. These are things that have come up over the last couple of years. Mark's done a great job of keeping track of all of the concerns that we have as they come up, and he has made sure that they got into a bill to clean up for the use of the clerks when running the elections. As far as Senator Daley with the credit card, that was a concern that we also had in Douglas County as far as if they decide to call and, not pay that on their credit card, or how would we handle that? So it was a discussion that we had. However, there are ways for us to go about opposing that with the credit card company and showing them that they had submitted paperwork stating that they were doing this. So there is a process for that on the credit card side. So there is a process. But thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Clerk Treasurer. Anyone else here in Carson City wishes to speak in support of Senate Bill 60 and the amendment? I cannot see anyone down at the Sawyer Building. Anyone in support? Not seeing anyone in support. I'll go broadcasting. If we could take us to the phone lines. Anyone who wishes to speak in support of Senate Bill 60 and the amendment?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support of Senate Bill 60, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders. That's CHRISTINESAUNDERS. I'm the Policy Director at the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, here in support of Senate Bill 60. SB 60 makes common sense election updates regarding candidate filing, the paying of candidate fees, timelines, and cybersecurity. We urge your support. Thank you.
Once again, to provide support testimony on Senate Bill 60, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no additional callers wishing to testify at this time.
Thank you, broadcasting. We can come back to the committee room in Carson City. We'll go to opposition. Anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 60, please come forward, state your name for the record, and proceed. Please go ahead, Ms. Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Janine Hanson. I'm the state chairman of the Independent American Party. We don't oppose this bill, but we have one concern we wanted to bring forward, and it was the same concern that Senator Gantz mentioned about extending the time of counting the ballots from the 7th day to the 9th day. There are other ways to resolve this issue of the time crunch after the election. People are very frustrated and concerned by this. We know...
And I'm so sorry to interrupt, but the proposed amendment proposed by Secretary of State Aguilar proposes to remove sections 6 and 10.
Oh, well then, we're good.
Okay. Well,
I tried to find that when I read the amendment, but I didn't see it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I wouldn't have had to come up here and bother you.
No worries. May I move you to support now?
I wish I understood the bill better, but it seems like I wouldn't be opposed anyway.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hanson. Anyone else here in Carson City who wishes to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 60 and the proposed amendment? All right, not seeing anyone in Carson City, down to the Sawyer Building. If you're in opposition to Senate Bill 60, please state your name for the record and proceed.
Yes, my name is Al Rojas. I live in AD 12 and Senate District 21. And I'm not sure, we can't hear very well in here, but I guess I'm opposed to them extending it from 9 to 11 days or the extra 2 days.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Rojas. There is an amendment proposed by Secretary Aguilar to remove sections 6 and 10. So that part of the bill would be deleted. There should be hard copies of the amendment there at the Sawyer Building. Otherwise, it is on Nellis.
Much.
Please continue.
Thank you.
Please continue.
Susan Prophet, and I'm the director of the Nevada Legislative Action Committee, and the Plaintiff Election Integrity Task Force and VP of the Nevada Republican Club. I know you just said that you took it off, and so I'll make this really brief. I'd like to apologize to the lady who seems to be offended by some of the things that I said. I was not trying to be disparaging. What I gave you was facts, and they are substantiated with
Ms. Prophet,
OSHA
if I could
filing
speak to the bill.
reports.
Ms. Prophet, I appreciate your testimony, but if you
Okay,
could speak
but
to
now
Senate
let
Bill
me say
60.
to the bill. Okay, to the bill. We need to do everything we possibly can in that particular bill to bring the cost down, not push it back up, because we have so many other needs in the state, especially education. And I would like to see less regulation. This is getting really tedious. I'm going to read the bill again because I believe you're going to bring it back. So I'd like to address some of these things at that time. But again, I'd like to encourage the Secretary of State that we have now to call me or meet with me, because I would love to give him a lot of information that'll make his job a lot easier. I initially brought in a team of people to set a benchmark for the operations of the ROV.
Ms. Prophet, I'm sorry to interrupt. I appreciate your testimony, but if you could just stay to the bill, speak to the bill.
All right. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Ms. Prophet. Appreciate your testimony. Broadcasting, if we could go to the phone lines. Anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 60?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition to Senate Bill 60, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no testifiers wishing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. We're now going to neutral testimony here in Carson City. Anyone who wishes to speak neutral to the measure? All right. Anyone down at the Sawyer Building? I don't see anyone else down there for neutral. Broadcasting, if we could go to the phone lines.
Well, I'm neutral at this point.
And Ms. Prophet, you did have your 2 minutes to speak. I appreciate your testimony, but we are going to neutral now.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Senate Bill 60, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you. Secretary Aguilar, Deputy Secretary Washington, any closing remarks you'd like to make on Senate Bill 60?
Thank you, Chair and the committee. This bill came about over the last couple of years since our last election in consultation with the clerks and the previous administration. I thank Secretary Sagaski for her input in this bill as well, and the work of Mark Velashan to make sure we continue to update our regulations and our statutes to be in line. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Aguilar. Appreciate your presentation of the bill. Deputy Secretary Washington, any closing remarks?
The only one I have, Chair, thank you, Mark Velashan, for the record. State, county, and city election officials are privileged to be able to spend the time with Title 24 that we do. This bill reflects that level of scrutiny that we have and the seriousness that we take our jobs, especially as it relates to security and transparency. So that, again, this is not something developed in a silo, very much hand in hand with the county, state, and city election officials. I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you very much. We'll now close the hearing on Senate Bill 60. The last item on our agenda is public comment. Public comment is limited to 2 minutes per speaker, and it would be anything you'd like to put on the record that is not related to any of the measures that we had hearings on today. So I'll start with Carson City. Anyone who wishes to make any statements in public comment? All right.
Hi, Susan Prophet.
Pardon me, we'll go down to the Sawyer
you.
Building. Please go ahead, state your name for the
Susan
record and
Prophet?
proceed. Go ahead, Ms.
Susan
Prophet.
Prophet. Okay. I want to speak to the fact that we could save a lot of time and money if the operations inside the ROV were changed to get them to count the ballots when they come in. They withheld over 20,000 ballots that were processed the first 3 days, and they withheld those and brought them out. They had been ready to be tabulated, but they didn't tabulate them. They withheld and didn't
Ms.
count
Prophet,
them until after
I appreciate
election
the public
day.
comment. However, if you're going to make allegations, I think that's something.
It's not an
this is not the
allegation.
forum here.
I have the proof, and I have witnesses. There were 2 lawyers there. We'll be happy to help the Secretary of State. their operations need to be streamlined, sir. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And I would love to be able to give you the evidence that Barbara did not read.
Thank you very much, Ms. Prophet. Anyone else who wishes to make
Thank
public
you.
comment? Thank you.
Comment? Can I make a comment?
Yes,
Just
go ahead,
general
sir.
comment?
Give
Go
me your
ahead.
name.
Yeah, my name is Al Rojas again. First of all, I just want to thank our Secretary of State for taking that extension off the bill. And as a general comment, I'd like to invite him to the hearing on Senate Bill 142, which is going to affect the security, and it's going to affect his office because it's going to affect the business environment in all of Nevada because they want to put vendors, they want to extend the homeless bill of rights, and it's going to increase crime. It's going to be harder for him to do his job in many, many different ways. So, and it's also going to give everybody the right to vote, and there's just going to have more work for everybody and for him to get our economy back to where it should be. So I just want to thank the Secretary of State for being such a great guy. And he was a real gentleman today when I was here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rojas. Here in Carson City, public comment. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
I would like to say that in speaking with the Deputy of the Secretary of State, I did ask him to consider meeting with the observers, because I know he is talking to the employees at the ROV and maybe the workers, but he hasn't heard anything from us at all. And so I have asked him that. He did write down my email and my information, and he never got back to me. And that's why we're speaking out today, because what do we do if they're not going to work with us? So, thank you.
I appreciate your testimony. Thank you, Ms. Rosentes. Broadcasting, if we can go to the phone lines. Anyone who wishes to make public comment.
Thank you, Chair. To provide public comment, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue.
Good evening. My name is Bob Russo. For the record, I just want to say it wasn't too long ago that votes were cast in person on the same day. And we usually receive the election results on Election Day. Absentee ballots were only available upon request. In my opinion, if we really want to restore trust in our elections, then we need to ditch voting machines and mail-in ballots, return to paper ballots and same-day voting with absentee ballots only available upon request. The COVID emergency is over, and all election legislation passed to accommodate it should be repealed. This would minimize the chance for voter fraud and increase our faith in the election process. If anyone is interested in viewing proven cases of voter fraud, I suggest that you visit the Heritage Foundation's election fraud database at heritage.org/voter fraud. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Russo. And again, I do want to remind you that both the prior Secretary of State, member of the Republican Party, and the current Secretary of State have both firmly stated that there has been no evidence of widespread voter fraud in Nevada. Broadcasting, is there anyone else on the phone lines who wishes to make public comment?
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'm queuing up the next caller. Caller, please proceed.
Hi, my name is Adrienne O'Reilly, ADRIENNEO'(REILLY). Unfortunately, due to a phone issue I had earlier, I missed my opportunity to speak on SB 60. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank everyone on the committee for their time here today, and especially thank Senator Severs-Ganser for some of the questions she posed. Thank you.
Caller,
Good evening,
you are muted.
everyone.
Please proceed.
Good evening, everyone. Cyrus Ojadi, CYRUS, HOJJATY. We'd like to thank everyone here bringing up some very important topics. and, discussing issues that really, really matter. And I do think trust is very important. But now, regarding the trustworthy of elections, if you want society to prove that there is trust in elections, and all I can say is there's just fishy things that happen, okay? If you want us to truly believe these elections are real, you can start by proving that whether or not the vaccine, the shots, the jabs, if they have worked. Because it's kind of ironic, the same people who say, well, these elections are wonderful, they're perfect, they were the same people, about 90-something% of them tell us that these lockdowns, these masks, and more importantly, these jabs work. And just want to know, did these jabs work? Can we get a report? Can we get a review? So if you want people to have faith and confidence in these things, tell us how effective these jabs were. We just want to get a report. That's it. We would appreciate if you not just take down those events, just toss it aside and walk along, and everybody just has to assume that nothing went wrong. Because this is something that affected not just here in Nevada, but hundreds of millions of people all over the world. So we'd like there to be an open discussion. And then, of course, if this was true or whatever happened, then it can just domino effect. And I like to ditto many of the other comments made by the previous speakers. Yield my time.
Chair, there are no additional public comment callers at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcasting. And again, I appreciate the public comments. I do want to reiterate that both our current Secretary of State, a registered Democrat, our past Secretary of State, a registered Republican, have both firmly stated that there has been no evidence of any widespread election fraud. So those accusations, I believe, are completely out of line. So with that, unless members have any other comments, I'll adjourn and we will meet next Tuesday. Thank you.